The dean's voice rippled through the stadium air, a sound wave crashing against concrete. Celine Valerius, master of quantitative economics, summa cum laude. It was a sentence that was supposed to solidify my existence. 6 years of weaving algorithms, of predicting market collapses, of turning chaos into structure. The applause was thin, a polite static rain for a ghost nobody knew. I didn't look at the camera lens. I looked at the negative space in row A. Seats 12, 13, and 14. 3 voids. 3 cold gray mouths gaping back at me. My mother had sworn on her soul she would be there. My father had promised with the solemnity of a judge. Even Serafina, my sister, the muse of the modern age, said she would descend from her pedestal to attend. I paused at the center of the stage, feeling the artificial gravity of the moment. I shook the dean's hand, a mannequin shaking a mannequin. And then, just as the flashbulb tried to capture my shadow, a vibration buzzed against my rib cage. My phone, hidden in the silk of my gown. A digital pulse. Once, twice, 3 times. For a fraction of a second, I allowed myself a hallucination. A flat tire, a twist of fate, a frantic text saying they were sprinting toward me, breathless with love. I walked off the stage, drifting past the whipping mothers and proud fathers, and pulled the device from the dark. It wasn't a text. It was a heartbeat from my server. Transaction alert. The Obsidian Room. $940. Authorization pending. I stared at the light. The Obsidian Room wasn't a restaurant. It was a temple of vanity downtown, reserved for those who needed to be seen eating more than they needed to eat. It was 40 minutes away. The timestamp was now. They weren't lost. They were feasting. They were consuming Wagyu and crystal-clear vodka to toast an abstraction. And they were doing it using the Lifeline credit card I had quietly slipped into my mother's purse 3 years ago. The oxygen in my lungs turned to ice. They erased my milestone to curate a dinner for Serafina's ego. I didn't cry. Tears are for people who can be hurt. I felt something else, a clicking sound in my brain, like a lock engaging. They thought I was just Celine, the shadow, the background noise, the static. They had no concept that the card they were swiping was attached to the mainframe that simulated their entire comfortable reality. I hovered my thumb over the decline button. "Feast while you can, mother," I whispered to the glass screen. Then I opened the master terminal of my financial architecture. I wasn't just going to decline a meal. I was about to decompile their world, line by line. To understand why I didn't scream, you have to understand the architecture of the Valerius bloodline. We were a binary system. My sister, Serafina, was the sun. I was the void. Serafina was 2 years my senior, a creature made of light and angles. She didn't have hobbies. She had epochs. When she was 12, she was a poet. My parents built her a library. When she was 18, she was a visual curator. They bought her lenses worth more than cars. Now, she was an ethereal influencer, a being who monetized her own existence. And me? I was Celine, the dark matter holding the galaxy together. I didn't need light. I needed logic. While Serafina was weeping because the golden hour lighting wasn't sympathetic to her complexion, I was mining cryptocurrency on a rig I built from scrap metal in the basement. By the time I was 19, I had designed a high-frequency trading bot that harvested volatility. It printed money in the silence of the night. I remember the day the wealth solidified. I sat at the mahogany table. My mother was weeping over a stack of red envelopes, foreclosure notices, debts that smelled of desperation. Serafina was in the solarium, screaming that her aura was being stifled by poverty. I opened my mouth to speak. "Mom, I have the solution. I am the solution." But then I saw her eyes shift to Serafina. The worship, the desperate need to burn herself alive just to keep Serafina warm. I realized the fundamental theorem of our family. If I revealed my power, I wouldn't be their daughter. I would be their fuel source. They would burn me until I was ash to keep Serafina glowing. So, I became a ghost. I didn't hand them cash. I built a shell. Ether Corp. a faceless entity. When the bank came for the keys, Ether Corp swallowed the debt. My parents call it divine intervention. They didn't question the miracle. They just bought Serafina a ticket to Milan. When my father's architectural firm began to crumble, Ether Corp became the silent benefactor. Dad walked tall, bragging about the visionary investors who believe in his genius. He never looked down to see his daughter supporting the foundation. I spent 4 years simulating their success. I paid for the heat, the water, the bread, the wine. I wanted to curate their happiness. I hypothesized that if I removed the variable of stress, they would finally observe me. But staring at that $940 notification, the hypothesis failed. I wasn't their savior. I was their simulation engine. I had rendered a perfect world where gravity didn't apply to them, and because of that, they felt no gravitational pull toward me. I looked at the pending charge. They were probably toasting to vibes. End simulation, I murmured. I opened the Ether Corp terminal. I navigated to assets, real estate, 1402 High Garden Lane. Technically, my parents were occupants. Ghosts in a machine I owned. They paid 0 rent. I tapped modify parameters, status update, eviction protocol initiated. Reason, failure to exist. I arrived at the house before the timeline caught up to them. I parked my rusted sedan, a prop I used to signal struggle, in the shadow of the oak tree. I walked toward the house. It was a pristine construct. The white pillars, the manicured ivy, the Mercedes SUV gleaming like a dark jewel in the driveway, all assets of Ether Corp. I unlocked the door and stepped in the climate-controlled silence. It felt like walking into a stage set after the actors had gone home. I walked to the mantel. There was no space for my diploma. The space was occupied by a canvas print of Serafina's face, filtered to look like a Renaissance painting. I went to the kitchen. On the marble island, a note in Dad's handwriting, manifesting Aether Corp funding for Serafina's spiritual retreat in Bali. Bali. She wanted to consume tranquility on my dime. I sat on a stool in the darkness, becoming part of the room's geometry, waiting. Time stretched. Then beams of light cut through the window. The Mercedes purred into the driveway. I heard the doors slam, followed by Serafina's laughter, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The energy in that room was transcendent. Mom, Serafina's voice floated in. The obsidian room really aligns with my current frequency. If Aether comes through with the expansion capital, we'll buy a membership, Dad boasted, his voice thick with unearned power. They flowed into the kitchen, a wave of perfume and arrogance, and then they crashed against the rock of my presence. I was sitting there, still in my academic regalia, the mortarboard cap resting on the marble like a black tombstone. Spirit, Serafina gasped, clutching her chest. Celine, you look like a reaper sitting there. Why is the lighting so aggressive? Mom sighed, the sound of a balloon deflating. Celine, honestly, you're back. We were going to manifest a text to you. You sent a transaction, I said, my voice devoid of texture. You consumed the tasting menu on the Lifeline card. Dad waved a hand, dismissing the reality. Don't be linear, Celine. It was a creative summit. Serafina met a curator at the bar. We were weaving the future. I turned my head slowly. You missed my graduation. To weave the future at a bar? It wasn't a bar. It was a sanctuary, Serafina corrected, her eyes rolling toward heaven. And honestly, Celine, graduation is so industrial. It's just a factory stamp. You're smart, we know, but my brand is ascending. I needed the ancestral support tonight. We knew you'd understand, Mom added, pouring water from a crystal pitcher. You have your little savings from that data entry job, and Dad channeled the ether liaison today. They feel the synergy. We're practically merged. The room went still. Merged. I repeated. Yes, Dad said, loosening his tie. So decompress. Take off that costume. We'll reimburse the energy of the dinner when the wire manifests. Maybe we'll buy you a new calculator. You girls are two sides of the coin. Serafina is the face. You're the edge. I looked at Serafina, checking her reflection in a spoon. I looked at Mom, wearing silk I paid for. The illusion was absolute. They didn't see a daughter. They saw a background process. You're right, Dad, I said, standing up. Serafina is the face. I walked toward the stairs. Where are you projecting yourself? Mom asked. To my quarters, I said. I have calculations to run. The aether? It shifts? I ascended into the dark. They didn't know that the ether was about to evaporate. My bedroom was the cockpit. I sat at my desk, the monitors casting a blue Cherenkov radiation glow on my skin. Downstairs, they were playing ambient house music, celebrating the nothingness they had achieved. I cracked my knuckles. Time to delete the user profiles. First, the vessel, the Mercedes SUV. It was a lease under the corporate umbrella. I executed a script, asset recovery mode. The car's onboard computer would rewrite its code to brick mode. The engine would become a paperweight. Next, the life support, the utilities, power, water, the fiber optic pulse of the internet. I scheduled system purge for 7 a.m. The house would go blind. Then, the currency. Mom's platinum card? Void. The fuel cards Serafina used to drive to vortexes? Nullified. I was preparing the final command, total liquidation, when the door opened. Serafina floated in. She didn't knock. Stars don't knock. Celine, she drawled, leaning against the door frame like she was posing for a cover shoot. I require an offering. The venue for my celestial launch is vibrating with negative energy. They want a $5,000 deposit by sunrise. Mom's card had a glitch. She looked at me, inspecting her aura in my mirror. You have savings, correct? Write the check. Aethercorp will reimburse you when the cosmic funding aligns. Dad decreed it. I swiveled my chair, facing the muse. You request 5,000 units of currency. It's an investment in beauty, Celine, she said, speaking slowly as if to a child. My brand is the singularity. Once I launch, I will be infinite. I'll buy you a better desk. Just transfer the funds. We are blood. The universe provides. You missed my graduation, I said. Oh, ascend above it, she snapped, her mask slipping. It's a degree. I am building a legacy. Stop being so dense just because I have followers and you have algorithms. Are you going to write the check or do I have to tell Mom you're blocking my flow? Blocking her flow. I looked at her. The girl who had never felt the friction of reality. Exit, I said. Excuse me. Exit my room, Serafina. I am operating. She gasped, offended on a molecular level. Fine, be stagnant. Dad will manifest it. He always manifests it. You're just a shadow. She slammed the door. I waited 5 seconds. Then I turned back to the terminal. She thought Dad would manifest it. I watched the log. Transaction declined. $5,000, insufficient funds. I smiled. Launch aborted. I woke to the sound of entitlement fracturing. Mom, my steamer is dead. My silk is wrinkled. I opened my eyes. 7:05 a.m. The air conditioning was silent. The house was beginning to warm, the entropy setting in. I donned a silk robe, black, and descended. The main floor was a scene of primitive panic. Serafina was in the hallway, holding her iPhone to the sky like a religious icon. No signal, she shrieked. I can't live stream the sunrise. My followers need their daily affirmation. I'm on 3 grams. It's practically the dark ages. Mom was in the kitchen, aggressively tapping the touchscreen of the smart fridge, which was now just a dark monolith. Dad stormed in from the garage, wearing a towel and a look of existential dread. The water ceased mid-shave, he bellowed, and the garage bay is sealed. I have a symposium with the bank. I reached the bottom of the stairs. They turned to me, a tribunal of the helpless. Celine, Mom cried, rectify this. You speak the language of machines. Reboot the house. Check the flux capacitor. It's not the capacitor, Mom, I said, pouring a glass of room temperature water. The service is terminated. Terminated. Gad laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. Absurd. Either corp handles the infrastructure. It is automated. It must be a grid failure. Yes, call the liaison, Serafina demanded, thrusting her phone at me. Call the Ether representative. Tell them I am a verified user. I cannot exist offline. You want me to summon Ether Corp? I asked. Immediately, Gad shouted, on speaker. I wished to verbalize my displeasure. I looked at them, the unwashed, the unconnected, the unaware. Very well, I said. Let us convene. I tapped a single icon on my phone. A chime resonated, not from my phone, but from the iPad Dad had abandoned on the counter. It was a high-priority notification. Subject, EV Action Pro Call. Sender, Avercorp Architect. Dad froze. He stared at the iPad. Why is your device synced with the corporate frequency? He whispered. I smiled. It isn't synced, Dad. It is the source. Source? Mom blinked, her reality glitching. Celine, cease these riddles. Why do you possess the admin key? Because there is no Aether Corp, Mom, I said, my voice cool and detached. There is no board. There is no angel. There is only Celine. I took a step forward, invading their personal space. I constructed Ether Corp when I was 19. I purchased your mortgage debt 3 years ago to prevent your deletion from this neighborhood. I leased that Mercedes for Serafina because your credit score is a vacuum. Serafina laughed, a sharp, glass-shattering sound. You wear monochromatic basics. You have zero presence. You're claiming to be the hidden deity funding my lifestyle? You're hallucinating. You've been staring at screens too long. Audit the data, I said. Verify the routing number on your last grant. It matches my personal trust. Dad grabbed the iPad. He swiped with trembling fingers. He froze, his face drained of color, leaving him looking like aged parchment. The sequence, he wheezed. It matches. Impossible, Mom whispered. You sustained us. I simulated you, I corrected. Every gala, every retreat, every calorie Serafina consumed. I did it because I hypothesized that if I stabilized the system, you would acknowledge the architect. I thought if I saved the family, I would be integrated. I looked at them. But last night, in the obsidian room, I realized I didn't save a family. I funded a cult of personality, and I am dissolving the organization. Dad straightened. The shock transmuted into opportunism. Well, he exhaled, this is a revelation, but it is optimal. The resources remain internal, so re-engage the power, unlock the transport, and transfer that 5,000 to Serafina. We must restructure our portfolio. Our portfolio. You are experiencing a cognitive error, I said. You are not shareholders. You are squatters. And you are evicted. You wouldn't dare, Serafina hissed, her eyes narrowing. You are void. You need our light. I smiled. Test the hypothesis. One variable, I said. I have drafted a new covenant. Covenant? Mom asked, hope flickering. Yes, total dominion. I assume control of all assets. The Mercedes is repossessed. Serafina obtains employment, manual labor, within a solar week. Mom, you exist on a stipend. You adhere to this. You retain shelter. Serafina scoffed. I do not labor. I inspire. You are bluffing. Dad stepped forward, his voice dropping to a growl. Your sister is the priority. You will restore the simulation now, or you are exiled. You ungrateful shadow. We created you. Very well, I said softly. I tapped the screen. Execute command. System wipe. Finalize eviction. The smart lock bolted shut with a mechanical thud. The sprinklers retracted. The house died. You have 1 lunar cycle, 30 days to vacate, I said, turning to the door. The authorities are en route. Oh, and observe the horizon. I pointed to the Victorian mansion next door. I acquired that sector. I will be observing your departure from my balcony. I walked out. Behind me, they began to scream as they realized the Mercedes was a statue and the universe had stopped providing. Epilogue, the architect's view. 6 months later, I sat on the veranda of my new estate, watching the geometry of the morning. Across the hedge, a moving van was extracting the remnants of the Valerius delusion. My parents were relocating to a substandard unit in the industrial district. Gad was filing paperwork. Serafina was working at a juice bar. She wasn't allowed to take selfies. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Celine, we require assistance. The energy is low. I archived the message. I looked at the empty driveway where the Mercedes once gleamed. The simulation is over, I whispered to the silence. The best revenge isn't noise. It's turning off the lights and watching them realize they never glowed on their own.